what do you point to as kind of the easiest defense of it's not fraud?
I don't think it's like a morality issue, but it's like coming in from like a loss of this magnitude, and especially touching upon an industry that requires a lot of technical background knowledge to be able to understand. It's just like very hard to process all of that and then come to a balanced conclusion when there's so much pain and anger in the air.
To see it all play out in a span of 72 hours, were you even surprised at like how quickly it unraveled?
I just didn't think this would happen. You know, thinking about this and then trying to build this ecosystem and community was basically what I spent the last 5 years on every waking moment. I just haven't found the words to describe, you know, what that feels like. But I'm sure that a lot of people in the community that lost their money, life savings, and different projects that we're building on top of Terra probably went through similar and it's quite possibly worse experiences.
And as far as like a creator of anything like this, I mean,
it's brutal. Obviously, like in hindsight, a lot of the beliefs and sort of the conjectures that I had made were wrong.
Trust is at the core, I think, ironically, in a lot of these trustless systems. It does come down to like, do you trust the people running these things? What do you say is the thing to, no, you can trust me?
I think if you were in this for personal benefit, that is probably the dumbest way to try to get that personal benefit as possible. Why put in 5 years, stake your entire reputation, name your daughter Luna, and then just have, for a brief moment in time, be the most hated person on the internet? And I think in terms of, you know, healing wounds, the best that I can do is to just be upfront with, you know, everything that happened. You know, just admit that I was wrong.
It was pretty elaborate in the way that it worked. Yield-bearing stablecoins were a thing. Anchor comes around though, and it's not 8%, it's 20%. And it sounded like when that was set up, there were maybe some employees that were a little uncomfortable with the idea of 20%. It was far higher than what was out there.
Actually, just to set the record straight, sort of the internal consensus of what people wanted to do with the interest rate was several thousand % APR, like
Really?
with Anchor in the beginning. And it's not a function of like them thinking, trying to make things unsustainable is a good idea. So what was a lower interest rate in the beginning turned out to be, you know, pretty high.
At what point, maybe on the run up, when you saw Anchor eventually capture almost $17 billion, in that journey, was there a point where you said, we're untouchable?
I felt like every day UST was getting stronger than the previous day.
There's also another operation going on behind the scenes though, at the same time, that did seem, I guess, different from what the original promise of UST and Luna always was, which was it was an algorithmic stablecoin that functioned perfectly without the need for a reserve.
So we felt that by adding multiple different types of collateral, starting with Bitcoin, UST had a real chance to become the decentralized money for all of crypto.
But I'm curious where that kind of plan came from and what made you want to introduce that at that time.
So we started to do that with Bitcoin because we believe that it's the most resilient, the least biased digital currency on the planet. If we were optimizing for like economic stability, we probably would have built up a reserve in stablecoins, other stablecoins. I think on some other level, I believe too strongly in Bitcoin. I honestly didn't think it would fall this much. And I know that, you know, from time to time in its history, Bitcoin has gone down 80% every now and then. But my thinking back then was like the amount of economic output that's been built in crypto, the amount of people that have come in and started to build in this industry is unparalleled compared to all the other points in time. I felt like it was starting to display resilience as a decentralized, pristine type of commodity. But I was wrong.
Let's actually walk through the timeline for what actually happened here though. And that kind of begins over the weekend. And UST dips slightly below peg. Twitter personality Do Kwon seems very calm and collected. Do Kwon in person talking to the Terra team as this is starting to unfold. What's happening on that day?
So I was in Singapore. I wake up in the morning and then I think the curve pool was imbalanced because somebody had done like a very large trade. So I think the initial trade was like $84 million, and then collectively it had built up to like a few hundred million. But then like the sentiment on Twitter started to get worse, and then there started to be more people that were trading against their curve pools. So the amount of sell pressure that we were seeing, started to get worse and worse. So we started to put together a $2 billion round, like in the middle of the night, and the news leaked. Once the news leaked, we started to see massive shorts pile up against Luna. So the value of the tokens that we were ready to sell just basically got decimated.
When the deal didn't come through, what was the situation in the war room at that point?
When I was trying to do the round, it wasn't so much that I thought like the peg would be irrecoverable. So like you got to understand, like I've been through multiple of these crises before, and then the peg always recovered.
At what point did the discussions in the war room shift from, all right, look, we tried everything, didn't pan out?
So when I went into like a mini state of shock, I think I didn't notice, but I think people started to like get up and get some sleep, because for the past few days, like most people in those places just hadn't been sleeping at all.
Yeah, how much sleep did you get during that whole week?
For like 8 days, I don't think I slept at all.
You pulled 8 straight all-nighters?
So 7 nights, and then I think I had 1 burrito throughout the entire time.
A burrito?
1 burrito, half a burrito. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I just didn't notice the passage of time. So like even now, if you were to ask me what happened during the day, what happened at night, I just wouldn't be able to tell, because I just, I barely got up and was, like it was just like all a blur.
It was dark.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a dark, the Terra community boards, there were talks of suicide and people who had lost life savings. My co-founder had a family friend who killed himself too. It was just, there's a lot of stories like that.
Right.
I mean, what do you tell the people that were impacted by this?
Yeah, so after the chain halted, I spent a couple of days calling a lot of the people that I'd personally talked to in the Terra community. It's the calls were rough.
Is there like a part of you that maybe would want to walk back what you said before, though, around particularly the language you used around people who flagged some of this stuff before?
I think I developed like sort of an entertaining alter ego to, match the community that I was engaging with. In retrospect, if you were to ask me whether like the manner in which some of these comments were conveyed were cringe, yes.
How has the experience that unfolded with Terraform changed Do Kwon?
And I think like the biggest learning is like I have a lot of clarity on the things that I enjoy doing. So I like this moment where you sort of have an idea of what you think the future should look like, and then that sort of converges to the present because of the work that you've done.
I mean, what was your personal loss around all this too?
Like quantified in dollars, or?
Because I think you were a billionaire on paper, at least, when this was when it was doing well.
Sure, yeah.
And if you're attached to this project and it goes to zero.
So like one of the jokes that people tell each other, like when markets turn bad, is down bad or down horrendous, right? And the word that I use to describe what happened here is down infinite. I mean, I just want to make it perfectly clear. The way that I thought about Terra and Luna was, this was essentially my life. I put my actions where my beliefs are. And I bet big, and I think I lost.
Overnight, the home of Do Kwon's co-founder, Daniel Shin, was raided by Korean prosecutors.
What does this mean for Do?
Like we were talking about yesterday, the Chai payment system, the startup that they co-founded, was always kind of different than Terra. So Terra was kind of built as an offshoot, and Daniel Shin moved off of Terra to focus just on Chai.
Yeah.
And, their friend, Daniel Shin, officiated Do's wedding, and now he's still in Korea kind of facing this.
Yeah, but if you were going to do an investigation and go after the top guy, you circle around him. and you slowly come in.
I mean, this isn't a legal question, since you're not a lawyer, I'm not a lawyer, but what are you prepared to face?
Well, in terms of, like dealing with due process, right? It's not a question of what you are prepared to face.
Yeah.
It's a question of how you are going to face them. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, after the crash, your legal team all left. We're doing this interview now because you want to talk about what happened truthfully and transparently. I don't know if you're talking to other lawyers now and they're saying, yo, you probably shouldn't do this. Are they?
I mean, no lawyer is going to be happy, but it is what it is.
But around those who are now attached to this, right? We were talking about Daniel Shin, your co-founder, and last night the news that prosecutors raided his house to go in and try and figure out what happened here. I mean, is that a decision? How do you feel about that impacting him now?
Zach, whenever you ask questions about me feeling bad, like the default answer is always going to be that I feel terrible, obviously. And especially given it's been a while since he stepped away from the company, I don't think, whatever happened here has anything to do with him.
He's still in Korea. Former and current Terraform Labs employees can't leave Korea. Does part of you say I should go back?
So right now it's kind of hard to make that decision because we've never been in touch with the investigators. They've never charged us with anything.
But I mean, as you look back at things, what's your take on, I guess, how you define fraud?
Well, if you knew something that wasn't true, and then you argue that was true for personal enrichment or whatever purpose that might be, then that's fraud.
When it comes to that, though, and kind of the use of UST and the Korean stablecoin on Terra through Chai, and if it was starting to unwind because not a lot of people were using it, and if that was in March when it was completely done, I think on the Palm podcast, which was after that, you're still talking about Chai as being a reason to be bullish on the Terra ecosystem.
I didn't know that they paused the March 18th thing until recently when the Wall Street Journal asked us about when did Chai pause, Terra on-ramps and off-ramps.
Yeah.
That's because I was no longer involved in Chai management.
But this is your best friend's company, and one that you said you built and were part of. And so I feel like, if there was anything that might be in your radar of things that could potentially change and weaken maybe a bit of the risk to UST, I feel like that might be something that would come up.
No, I think you're right. I think if I said good things about something, good news about something, then by the principle of parity, I should have responsibility to say the bad things as well, especially if the good stuff that I said didn't pan out.
But I mean, something like that, overlooking risks, is that a crime in your mind?
As we were thinking about trying to build UST, we've, and I think TFL in general, all the people that chose to work here and all of sort of the key builders in the Terra ecosystem, their primary objective, in my mind, was to try to build the best decentralized money possible.
Yeah.
And I think all the things that they've said was in allegiance to that goal.
Again, let me ask this just as a question that people might ask, looking at these facts. Does that make you an Elizabeth Holmes?
I don't think so.
No.
No. Yeah.
Why not?
Well, I'm not too familiar with the Theranos story, but didn't she take medicine that wasn't working or a blood tester that wasn't working and that it could potentially hurt people?
It was mostly overselling the product and what it could do.
I thought the product could do nothing.
Exactly.
I don't think that's the case here. I think whereas we tended to highlight the good stuff about the products that were built on top of Terra stablecoins, I think everything that excited us about Terra stablecoins were true.
But this is a pretty important question. If it's called a stablecoin and its point is to be stable, someone could look at UST and say, this product did nothing.
Yeah,
Fair or not fair?
I think the right analogy there would be if like the blood testers were working for a while and then after some time it just totally stopped working, then I would think it would be the same analogy. But this is different, right? Like the blood testers never worked and then she lied about it and then said that they did. For Terra stablecoins, it was working beautifully throughout the entire history that it was. And the fact that it was working perfectly was visible in the order books and was present in all the integrations in the open source and transparent manner of crypto until it stopped working.
You're a smart guy, and you know stablecoins probably better than everyone in the world, I think. And you knew the risk around depegging in the fact that every other stablecoin in history, algorithmic stablecoins, had failed.
Right.
So it's either Do Kwon was overconfident in his project, and in retrospect, no one wants to admit to being overconfident because it makes you look dumb, or Do Kwon was lying about the eventuality of this. Which one is it?
So looking back, this seems super irrational, but you gotta put yourself in the shoes of a founder, and the ecosystem is inching close to $100 billion. If you've had a series of wins and you get to that scale, then like you almost don't think that you could fail.
You were a crypto god at that point, basically.
I wouldn't say God. I would say that we had the confidence and the trust of a lot of people in and out of the industry. And that made us very successful. Just the reality of it is we tried to build the best currency in the world and it just didn't work.
I mean, that was one thing that stood out yesterday when we were talking. You actually kind of seemed all right with it.
You cannot be emotional about markets, right? You can't blame people for shorting. You can't call people idiots for longing.
In terms of, you're not trying to prove a conspiracy here, but someone attacking the community, it was, this is the time to strike and take this thing down. And if that's the case, it's a little bit more calculated.
Yeah, so if you're asking me whether there was a mole at TFL, that's probably yes. Whether somebody tried to take advantage of that particular opportunity, I would say that the answer is yes. But if those opportunities existed, then the blame is on the person that presented those vulnerabilities in the first place.
Who is that?
That's me, right? So I and I alone am responsible for any weaknesses that could have been presented for a short seller to start to take profit.
And I guess it's fair to ask and make sure that it wasn't you.
Are you asking whether I shorted?
Yeah.
I've never shorted a cryptocurrency in my life, let alone Luna and UST.
When you think about your daughter too, though, you talk about why you named her Luna, your dearest creation named after your greatest invention. What does that mean for her? And what does it mean for you as a father?
Well, so let's just say that I have an incentive to make sure that her name isn't something that she should be ashamed of, but something that she can be proud of. Yeah, we're not going to change her name or anything like that. I think it's an important part of our family's history. But I plan to be building here for a long time. And if my thesis is right, then I think what I spend time doing over the next 20 years is going to be more meaningful than what happened over the last 6 weeks.